There we are. We're live. Breakfast Club PT Breakfast Club, no matter which way you say it, which I always screw up. He's Tony Maritato. I'm Andrew McKay. It is bright and early on Tuesday morning, and we're waiting for Dave Kittle because that's how things work. Isn't that kind of fun where you can just essentially broadcast a TV show from our living rooms and Dave will just join whenever?
It's just incredible. Now, for people watching, I thought this would be interesting. Dave and I were talking. He's coming in a minute. This is a webcam. So this is the Brio. Yeah, this is the Brio 4K. I don't know if I'm just not using it right, or I just feel like the image is terrible. My DSLR is with my oldest boy. He's doing a bunch of footage for a theater camp. But I figured I'd show Dave. We can bring him in whenever you want, Jimmy. I figure I showed Dave, like, this is what the Brio 4K looks like compared to my normal, you know, like it's a deep focal length, like everything's in focus. You don't have the rich colors, and it's just not nearly what it's like with the DSLR.
Yeah, if you ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? You don't need to spend $10,000. You don't even need to spend $1,000. But if you spend a couple hundred, the difference between a 99. Well, how much is the Brio? The Brio's like $100, right?
Yeah, I think it went up to like 120. But this is actually interesting. So, Jimmy, you're on a DSLR, right?
Correct.
So you've got Jimmy on the DSLR. I'm on the Brio. Dave's on the webcam, on the like laptop webcam. So
it makes a difference, especially if you're going to use it a bunch of if you're going to use it more than once. So we can get into if you're going to use it with telehealth, if you're going to use it with shooting content or live streaming and doing those things. There's a minimum, there's a floor. Dr. Bo saying top of the morning. What do you want to start with? You want to start with my topic? I came across this online, and this was someone we actually from an organization we just talked to. We talked to Pedro, Dr. Pedro from Prediction Health, and then this is how it works. I, of course, on LinkedIn then follow Prediction Health because I was like, I don't know, Pedro seems cool. And they released this article written by their director, their VP of Business Development, who I don't know. But now I come across their article because I start following the organization. This is Andrew Schaefer. And Andrew essentially breaks down what it costs to lose a therapist. He actually brings the receipts, which I like. So we're diving in deep to this topic. I thought he went really, really deep to show, like, we all know, like, well, yeah, losing a therapist, you're not gonna be able to bill as much. You're down one licensed therapist. But he went deeper into the costs to actually give it an objective measure. And I think he was being really, really, I would love your thoughts because both of you do this, and I just watch from the sidelines. He was estimating $65,000 per therapist departure. Before we get into his receipts, is his number low, pretty close, or high?
I mean, I hear, you know, everybody will tell you it's more expensive to have high turnover than it is to keep an employee. And they'll tell you that if somebody's going to leave and they're a good employee, you're better off to pay them more money and just keep them on board. But I think, like most things, right? We're physical therapists. It depends. That's the saying. I'm going to share my experience on how I used to optimize my business for high turnover. Like I would not expect somebody to be with me 3, 5, 10 years.
You wanted high turnover. That's what you just said. You optimized for high turnover. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah,
go for it.
So here's the thing. Going into, you know, physical therapy as a business 20 plus years ago, I realized, like, if I wanted the best people on my team, they were not going to be satisfied being the same person doing the same thing for a 20-year career. They weren't widget makers. They're not going to just like come in, clock out. Those are not the best people. The best people have high ambitions. The best people are expecting to grow. In fact, Dave, you would know this. Ben Galen, is that his last name?
Yes, Ben.
Yeah. So I was on, you know, an office hours with Ben recently, and Ben and I had very opposing views. And I mean, I can't even compare to Ben's success, so I don't want to pretend that I'm on the same level. But I had said something regarding, you know, kind of the employees running the ship instead of me, the captain, running the ship. And he had an opposite view. And I think it's totally legitimate. So from my perspective, and this is a theme that carries through my entire life, I'll take on a battle if I think the reward is worth it. But most of the time, I'm not looking for battles. I'm not looking for friction. I'm going to take the easy route. And so when I recruit a therapist, if I think it's an amazing therapist, I know that their life with me is very short. because they're going to move on to bigger and greater things. And if I start a business, I'm Dave and I talked about it. I'm starting the business with the exit strategy in mind. Everything is about kind of building to an end. And so for me, when I optimize, I'm planning on that person leaving, hopefully not before 18 months, but probably not staying with me longer than 3 years. So I think my cost of turnover is very low because I know what's coming. I know where I'm going. But if I'm blindsided, and I think this is going to be a 20-year clinician, and I put all my eggs in that basket, and I'm not recruiting, and I'm not planning, I'm not looking for, new opportunities, yeah, you're going to get crushed. Somebody is going to quit. Then they're going to walk out the door. Then you're going to have a month, 2 months, 3 months of low productivity. You're going to miss out on patient visits. You're going to have recruiting costs. You're going to pay a premium for probably somebody who's not even worth the premium. So I understand where the article is going, but I think if we're in this world and we think we're going to recruit the best clinicians, if Dave wants to come work for me, Jimmy was going to come work for me, I can't expect guys like that to stay with me for a 40-year career. There's no growth. There's no long-term. Go ahead.
It sounds as if, I'm going to use a analogy, metaphor. I don't know. Someone will check me on that. It sounds like you're preparing yourself to be a really, really good AAA baseball team. You're like, hey, I want the best players on their way up, hoping, knowing that the really great ones are hopefully going to leave. And then maybe you'll wash the rest of them out and send them off to a different team or drop them down to AA. But you're optimizing for this. So what did you do to optimize for it? So you built in failure, which I think is probably more realistic than I'm going to find the best 4 therapists in my area. I'm going to provide the greatest working environment ever, and they're going to stay forever. And that, to be honest, that one sounds just insane to even suggest. So how did you optimize for knowing that these people were going to leave?
It's different based on the phase of the business. So at one point in the business, I was looking at, negotiating things that were not 20-year things. So if somebody wanted more time off and less pay, I could provide that. If somebody wanted exposure, so they wanted to get on social media and they wanted to use my platform, I could provide that, knowing that I'm creating a personal brand for them to then leverage on their own. But also just in terms of compensation, like I might be able to start somebody at a higher initial compensation, knowing that I'm not starting at 100,000, getting to 120. I'm starting at 100,000 and they're going to leave in 2 years. That's okay. But I'm going to, do what I need to do for the business, for that person to make everything work, using the baseball analogy. And this will turn over to Dave in a second. I'm not going to recruit a pitcher and make him play left field. I understand what the role of that person is. Now, full 180 degrees, my team today is the team. They're going to die on the ship. They're going to stay with me. They've been with me over 11 years. They're not going anywhere. Some is family. Some are, close relations now. When they leave, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not staying in business. I'm not replacing them with new employees. So like everything, businesses change, philosophies change, my ideas change. But in the beginning, I did build, and I remember distinctly talking to new grads that I was hiring saying, look, this is not your job for the next 40 years. I hope to get your best 2 or 3 years, and then you grow, then you improve, then you move on to the next job.
Dave, you're up the batting order.
Yeah. So recently, there was also something that came out from Ben Fong with UpDoc Media, and it was similar to this write-up. And the replacement timeline was something around 6 to 8 months, per therapist. So you look at the timeline, which is significant. You look at this dollar amount, which is, a pretty, big chunk of change. But at the end of the day, this is also just to pause for a second, this goes on in every industry. This is no different now than any other time in physical therapy. And here's an example. So when I came into Brooklyn from New Jersey, I was a clinic director for a Metro Sportsman. It became Motion. I eventually left to go do my own thing. Right. And then the next therapist that came in after me was a staff physical therapist somewhere else in the company that moved over to that location. And then that physical therapist left to go. And now I think he's in Texas or some other state, but he left also to go do his own business and his own practice. And so this is something that organizations just have to understand, and most of them that are way bigger than, you know, Tony and I, like most of them understand this point, which is the staff physical therapist will absolutely come and go. And if you want to identify talent and retain talent, then you have some ladder, you have some, you know, clinic director, you know, regional director, whatever, you have some ladder track that's potentially available for them to see and acknowledge and understand where they can kind of grow into, whether it's an increase in salary over time, which is usually going to be increase in responsibility and role, maybe more treating patients, but obviously there's a ceiling there. So this is no different than any other time, other than just like, you know, Prediction Health, I think a pretty solid blog article with the dollar amount. Then at the end, of course, they're pitching their own service, but you know, that's just the way I guess blogs are. Magically book at the end of it, book a call now for Prediction Health's AI thing, which, and I've heard from Sturdy McKay, I've heard Prediction Health, and I didn't talk to Pedro with you guys, but I heard that the software is pretty cool and it works really well on the practice management side. But again, it's no big, like, this is just something that's happened. Like, this is just, it happens. And if you want to keep great therapists, you have to pay them more or find places for them. And then I'll kick it back to you guys. But like, I put out an episode last week with Chris Naipaul. He was an excellent physical therapist with me, young, energetic, motivated, worked with me for like a year or two. And then went and started his own practice, kind of competing with me in Manhattan, but not really, because he takes Medicare Part B. So it's like, some of these folks also, by the way, we can't retain. Like if Tony and I hire like an entrepreneurial physical therapist, they might have a detour with us for 1 to 3 years, but they're going to go do their own thing anyway, regardless.
If you're hiring really great A players and then you're surprised when they go A play, say that again to yourself. Like you're hiring people who are motivated, who want to do above the average, and then you're shocked when those people succeed. I was taught this in radio is you should be training those people out of a job. Like you should essentially be training those people so that at some point they do go on to bigger and better things. Or you should be training your replacement so you can go on to bigger and better things. I just like the article. I thought it was a cool analysis of all the costs that we might mention in terms of impact to the patients, impact to the team, training and onboarding, hiring, travel therapists, recruitment costs, which can be about 25% of the clinician's salary, which I had no idea. That's how some recruiters. Is that a little high? It's
a little high. 10%. I like me likey at 10%, but I'm also on the employer side. So like,
you're also in New York City, where the population density in therapists might be a little faster to find, easier to find, less competitive. Well, more competitive for them, better for you.
Let's not forget, though, this is a tech company. Tech rates are just outrageous.
Sure.
So I wouldn't be surprised if tech recruiting costs, executive recruiting costs, are in that 25% range.
Sure.
One thing I was going to say, though, when we're looking at this, and I think did this one also talk about burnout a little bit, or was that something else?
Yeah, they mentioned burnout. It was actually that was the title, $65,000 per therapist departure, understanding the true cost of a PT's burnout.
Yeah, I don't make that connection, but either way,
agreed. Let's keep going.
Either way, I think there's a misconception, and this discussion, I might not take it the way Dave's thinking, but we hear all these discussions about minimum wage thresholds, and you have to have a minimum wage and all this stuff. And to me, it just goes back to, look, if I'm going to come in, and no disrespect, like I'm the owner of my clinic and I clean the toilet in my clinic. But if I was being hired to clean the toilet in the clinic, I'm paid to clean the toilet, whatever that is worth. Not Tony Maritato is worth this much, so that's what he's getting paid. And when we look at burnout, when we look at frustration, I think there are so many elements to that. I want to mention two real quick. One is, I think it's the therapist who thinks, I'm going to come get a job at the skilled nursing facility to deliver physical therapy services. That's what the job is. It's not at the highest possible level, and you're going to get all these extra certifications, and you're going to be, this amazing physical therapist and compensated for your amazement. It's you're coming to deliver physical therapy services. And that is a basic minimum wage physical therapy job. And so I don't care if you stay 20 years or 2 years or, that is what the job pays. If you want to be compensated for your achievement and your knowledge and your success, go into private practice or go work for a business that recognizes that.
Right.
Medicare doesn't recognize that. The same therapist gets paid the same rate for the same CPT code, regardless of their education, their expertise, how much the patient enjoys it. So I think they get frustrated because they're like, I've been working 20 years. I put every ounce of effort in and I'm getting paid, the same as I got paid 10 years ago. That's the job. That's what you're getting paid for that. Go ahead, Dave.
Tony and I disagree on a lot. I think that's a good thing. And sometimes we've had good feedback from others that say they kind of love the conflict and the back and forth. But I agree with you on this, Tony. You said it right away that I don't make the connection either. And I kind of feel like when I read this blog article, I feel like they put the word burnout in there just to get more clicks or more views or, whatever. The word should not be burnout. It should be, okay, here's the blog title, 65K per therapist departure, understanding the true cost of a PT's burnout. It should be understanding the true cost of a PT's replacement cost or hiring and recruiting or whatever. And they put the word burnout in here just like because.
Can I tell you why I think they did that?
I mean, because more of this negative crap, like on Facebook groups with PTs, like all this negative, the more negative, the better. Let's share it.
Yeah, maybe. I think they put it in there because if they did the real cost of a clinician's departure, the article would only appeal to clinic owners. I think if you put burnout, I see me as a clinician in there, and then I see cost and departure. And so it appeals to two audiences if you write it that way. I don't know. I'm not saying he did it like that.
But who are they selling their software to?
Right. But the way to get more blogs, to get more clicks at the bottom is to become a viral article. So if it was devious, and I would,
They're TMZing the blog article headline.
Sure. Don't you think I DM'd the author of the article and just let him know, hey, great article. We'll be talking about it tomorrow on our live stream? Yes, I did, to see if they would, comment on it or decide to show up. So it was sharing information.
So the other aspect, and this might be a little mini segment here talking about burnout, is I think a big part of the burnout problem, I don't even think it's pay. Like, I know, we don't get paid enough. We hear all those stories, but I think it's just so many therapists are in a position, they're powerless to not treat patients who don't want to be treated. Now, I've been sharing some Facebook and LinkedIn posts about this. I'd be curious to hear your guys' perspective. I never worked in skilled nursing, for any length of time. I never worked in acute care for any length of time, but I did clinical rotations. You guys did too. I remember sitting in there, looking at patients, looking at therapists. The patient has zero interest. They're rarely conscious, but even the ones who were have zero interest in doing anything the therapist wants them to do. Now, here's the full context to the best of my ability. Medicare is paying the bill. This is not a patient self-pay situation. Medicare is paying the bill. The therapist is under pressure from management to get the CPT codes billed, to get the minutes of therapy delivered, to do whatever it is. The patient is begging the therapist to leave them alone. I don't want to do this. Please stop. To the point where I remember as a student, my CI was working with a patient. I think it was in the parallel bars. The patient was like, no, I don't want to do it. Please, I don't want to do it. And the therapist basically dragged the patient out of the wheelchair to make them stand. And I remember talking to somebody else later and them saying, look, now put yourself in a courtroom. You're the therapist. That's the patient. That's the lawyer. That's the patient's family. The judge says, or whoever, the patient's like, I begged them to stop, and the therapist wouldn't stop. That's really what's happening there.
Sure.
But we're in a vacuum. We're stuck in this. So I can imagine the disconnect in the patient's brain, no matter who the therapist's brain. They know the patient doesn't want to do it. I wouldn't want to do it if I was the therapist, but you've got this productivity hanging over your shoulders. I think that's a major part of burnout. Now compare that to like Dave's situation, where patients are throwing money at him, begging him to come help, to work with them, highly motivated, highly appreciative. It's just so many of our clinicians profession-wide are stuck in situations where they know what they're doing is wrong. Yeah. I would say at minimum ethically wrong, probably legally wrong, and yet they're forced or compelled to do it. That's what's burning out the profession.
Yeah, I mean, also go to just, quote, regular outpatient PT, the person showing up because they feel like they need to, but maybe they don't really know why. They showed up, right? Aren't you supposed to do the thing with the heat or the shocky shock or the cuppy cup things that make me look like I got attacked by an octopus? And most of your day isn't using the highest level of your brain. Most of it is like bribe. I've seen, therapists bribe, convince, and I'm with them sort of like, I get it. Like your job is to get them to arrive, pay, stay, keep coming back, do all those things that we talk about here and other places. And it feels like most of the time, like you're bribing people or trying to convince them to do something is right for them, will be helpful. They kind of believe it, but the juice ain't worth the squeeze. That's why they're there in the first place. So I could see that. I felt that most of the time it was try to get someone to do something. People don't want to go to the gym. They want to have gone to the gym. People don't want to do PT. They want to have done PT. I get that. And that was hard for me to reconcile. I can see that being a major friction burnout point.
So Scott said, Tony, you're spot on. Dealing with those kinds of patients all day long will suck the life out of you by the end of the day. Absolutely. Absolutely. So
is that Jimmy what it's like too? Because I'm not a parent. You guys are. Is that what it's like being a parent? Dave's, pretty new.
I think I'm too new to even comment. Yeah. Tony, what do you got?
I do like how Tony's drinking from his world's best dad mug, like throwing it in Dave's face. Like, I don't know, man.
Dave.
I'm trying to take a Stanley Cup for me. I've got world's best dad. But
absolutely.
I feel like it's like being a little bit of a parent, but you don't have that leverage over a patient, which is, this is what's best for you. I know you don't see it now, but if you do this, you'll get the thing that you want. And that's tiring.
I don't see, it's not like being a parent, at least not, I don't think so. There are frustrating aspects to being a parent, 1000%. And I'm always cautious to bring up parent analogies because I don't want it to sound condescending.
Yeah.
But no, it's not like that because my kids, I don't know. It's just different. But Jimmy brought up the word bribe. Dave mentioned bribe and manual therapy. Let's touch on this real quick because this is an important one. This is a good one. Dave, talk about the manual therapy being a bribe.
First of all, for the record, I don't think it is, but Tony Maritato has said that it is several times over the past several years, I believe. But there's some points you said, Tony, right? So like you said, some insurance companies, I think, are paying less for the manual therapy CPT code compared to like therapeutic exercise, which kind of has some parallels, I think, to the whole like telehealth extension or boom or whatever, where like obviously those therapists can't do manual therapy and they're doing therapeutic exercise. And so, Tony, you kind of said like some insurers might be understanding that, whether they're making their own assessments, they're doing their own data collection, whatever. And I kind of can see either way, but like at the end of the day, there's certain people that have like a stiff knee and they're not going to exercise their way out of it. They're not going to get more range of motion of their knee. Let's say like not knee replacement. Let's just say like a stiff, arthritic knee. And they tried, on a recumbent bike and they tried walking and they tried just doing the stairs in their apartment building or whatever. And they can't get more range of motion and they have knee pain. And they might just need some manual therapy knee mobilizations. That's just how I am because I come from like ortho outpatient type of world. So I don't think it's a bribe, but I think, Tony, it would be better if you kind of speak on it because you've kind of said that it could be or it is a bribe to get patients to come back and continue or to kind of give some people what they want because some people are looking for like the touchy-feely stuff, even though Tony's not as a patient and patients like Tony Maritato, some people don't want to be touched, and that's like a whole other conversation. I don't think it's a bribe, but I could see your argument, especially with outpatient. If Jimmy's my patient, I'll do the, like you said, some cuppings and this and that, some soft tissue work, whatever. Some people think massage, they get massage and physical therapy, whatever. I could certainly see manual therapy as a bribe, especially in the outpatient physical therapy world. I don't think it is, but I could certainly see the argument.
Yeah. So what's unique about the three of us, we can bring perspectives, I think, to the conversation, right? We've got different experiences, different backgrounds. Just like I said, I remember being a student and seeing that poor patient suffer through that treatment. I also remember, and I bet a lot of listeners are going to remember this as well, I would be sitting there in an outpatient ortho clinic and I would hear the therapist say, that patient's only coming for the manual therapy, and they would leave the manual therapy treatment intervention for the end of the treatment to get the patient to do all the exercise that needs to be done. Now, this is a blurry line. I'm the first one to admit it. Like, yeah, there's benefits to manual therapy. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is we have to understand the motivations behind it, right? So Dave said it. I see a lot of knee replacements. If I'm doing manual therapy on a knee because I'm thinking I'm going to improve range of motion, reduce guarding, inhibit pain response, all totally clinical, all totally reasonable, huge benefits to it. But if I'm going to rub their back and I'm going to save that back rubbing for the last 10 minutes of the session because they won't come if they don't get their back rubbed, to me, that's a bribe, and it's no different than me giving them a $20 bill because I'm going to get a $100 reimbursement. It's no different than me bringing in some sort of special, cupcakes at the end to get them to come. Going back to kids, it's just like bribing your kid. You can play video games for 60 minutes if you eat your broccoli tonight. So I do think historically, a lot of the things, passive modalities, manual therapy, they've been used as bribes in clinics to get patients to comply. Now, you could say, well, it's with good intent because it's like, well, look, if the patient doesn't do the exercise, they're not going to get better. But I go back to, if the patient's paying the bill, that's fine. I mentioned the continuum the other day where you've got, I don't care who the human is, I'm just treating the condition, to the other side where it's like, I don't care what the condition is, I'm just going to do what the human wants in front of me. There's a continuum. We're all going to fall somewhere in between. But if the insurance company, if Medicare is paying the bill, I am compelled, because I signed a contract, I agreed with Medicare's terms of service, I am going to do what Medicare is paying me to do within the scope of what they allow. If the patient's paying me the bill, totally different story. So I would just ask you, I don't care what you do. I would just ask you to really look at what you are doing, look at what your team is doing. Where's the motivation? And what's interesting here is we've all been privy to different conversations, right? When I sit in a group of just business owners, just practice owners, I'm a practice owner. I literally get uncomfortable with some of the conversations because it is so focused on units and productivity and minutes and dollars. I love me some dollars. I'm not against profitability, but it's so far to one extreme. But on the flip side, when I sit in another group, Jimmy, I listened to your conversation with the two individuals from the geriatric section. Amazing. Like they're so intelligent. They were just brilliant individuals, so passionate about what they're doing. But I felt like they were so disconnected to what the insurance company is paying for. That again, there's just, there's too much space between what they want us to do as geriatric physical therapists compared to what we're being paid to do as geriatric physical therapists.
And
so,
this is a disconnect where the therapist, and this is, I think, a big one, is what you're taught in school, right? Because the people I talked to from geriatrics, Jackie Osborne and Ken Miller, they're educators, they're clinicians who've been around for a million years, right? And they're so smart. And then students receive this information, go out to this place, apparently, real world, and it's different. And that misaligned expectation scares the crap out of students because they're like, I got to do this for 20 or 30 years. This was not on the brochure. I thought I was just going to be an amazing person and uplift and change human lives. And they're like, yes, but. And I think that misalignment in expectation and reality scares the crap out of people, and they look for the door. And I sort of don't blame them.
I saw an interesting post in one of the bigger groups, and it was a new grad who was taking this person's first job. And the first day of the first job, they had 3 evals scheduled. Now, I don't know the setting. I'm assuming it was a skilled nursing, maybe something. I don't know. But like, you could see the polar opposites of, I would say 60% of the responses were like, that is ridiculous. I can't believe they're giving you 3 new patients on the first day of business. You're a new grad. No, you're a licensed therapist. So it's like, if you're not ready to treat patients on day number 1, but you want a full pay on day number 1, like, okay, we need to figure this out. Now, that being said, Dave resonates with that message. I also understand. There are going to be people that are going to come in. They're going to work at 20% efficiency, and we're going to wear kid gloves when we're handling them. And, we're going to bring them up to speed. But that goes to the culture of the business. So you have to understand as a new grad, where are you going to work? What's the expectation of it? And what is your personality type? Are you the kind of person, we lost Dave, that can jump in? If you're a traveler, you better jump in. You know, if you're covering a vacation, you better be able to jump in. But what are your thoughts on that, Jimmy?
Yeah. Having been a new grad, my thoughts were, I want to be brought along slowly. At the same token, on day one, I agree with you. I was a licensed physical therapist. So what should be the issue? I think it should be treated just like a new employee. Like if I hired someone at a radio station or a construction site, I would say there needs to be some speed on this. The better you educate someone, the better they're going to perform in the beginning anyway. So I can see it from your side, and I agree.
What's Dave think?
All right, so I just got bounced out. I'm all on tilt now. I don't know what happened. I'm back in. I don't know what's going on with my internet. So the fact that this is a different culture now than before with therapists and I don't know what I have several things to comment on, and hopefully I can do it efficiently. The thing, like you just said, Tony, of a therapist having 3 new evals, it doesn't matter if you're skilled nursing, acute care, outpatient, you're a new therapist, first day, you got to build a caseload, right? How do you do that? New patient evals. So maybe that could be mentioned to the therapist, like, we got to really coddle you and let you know, hey, in your first week, in your first day or two, you might have a whole bunch of new evaluations to build up a caseload. I mean, to me, it seems obvious. When I went to Metro Sports Med, my 6th day of work, Tony, so the second Monday, my 6th day of working, the clinic director, who did like half ortho and half pediatrics, was out sick. And it was me and a new PTA that were new hires the previous, 6 days. I don't treat pediatrics and I don't really have a lot of training, but the front desk, for whatever reason, moved half of his caseload that day onto my schedule, and then the other half to the PTA, who was the new hire. The PTA had pediatric experience. I didn't. I ended up treating like a 3-month-old or a 6-month-old with torticollis, and I had no idea. It was the first time treating an infant, and I had to ask therapists in the practice, hey, what do you do? How I don't have experience. Like, should I see this patient or not, or whatever? And guess what, Tony? I'm different than I think a lot of these new therapists, because I was asking my colleagues, how do I do? What do I negotiate? I'm looking at the past notes of this patient, because the patient was already seen a bunch of times by the clinic director. And here, I thought, Tony, this was a test. I thought that they were testing me. So the last thing I wanted to do was go up to the front desk and say, hey, can you tell this, call the parents and say, cancel the visit? That is just beyond, and that maybe I'm more business minded, but that's just beyond me. That's the last thing I would do, is phone it in and say, hey, I want to cancel this patient because I have no pediatric experience. So I asked some of my colleagues. They gave me some confidence. They said, hey, go check the previous notes. Okay, I did that. Go check the previous notes and review what Dean has been doing for the patient and the parents' home exercise program, because the parents were stretching the infant's torticollis and doing some home exercises for it. And I went through the visit. Did the visit. And I believe now, I think the mom didn't look at me as like the best pediatric therapist ever, but the mom knew that I had some amount of either experience or just confidence. And I thought that was a test. And the fact that I'm so glad I didn't even see this post. I'm getting riled up just hearing about this post through Tony, that a therapist is going to take a new job somewhere. Like you said, Tony, they want the full pay starting on day one, maybe even the benefits on day one, potentially on how the organization is run. But don't give me 3 new patient evals. That's too much work. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and I think the truth is, Dave, you were probably a better clinician after you had that experience. It forced you to grow. You probably learned new things. Like, you made yourself better. But I think the big picture here, the message here is not that, and I'll say it's not that this person's right or wrong, good or bad, or whatever. I think we see how important culture is, the culture of the business, the culture of, the community, the patient base. I'll go into situations, even in my own clinic, where I know I'm walking into a firestorm. I was in the clinic yesterday covering vacation for somebody. I would say at least 3 people walked in who weren't on the schedule. My failure as a leader, my systems broke down, plus the 3 people that were on the schedule. And these were pretty complicated cases. You know, relatively speaking, they were pretty complicated cases. Was it comfortable for me? Was I happy that that happened the way it happened? It wasn't. But the culture of the business, the culture of the patients that were coming to my business, we all had a great time. We talked about gardening. One of the patients had just opened a restaurant. She was talking to us about how a restaurant's going. You know, I'm in a relatively small town. 2 or 3 of them were neighbors that knew each other. So it was no big deal. Nobody was offended or angry that they didn't get the one-on-one care of that stuff. I billed appropriately for the units that were delivered, that were direct one-on-one care. But the point of that is, I think there are a lot of clinicians, rightfully so, that would have quit after something like that, because that is not something within their personality. It's not something that they want to deal with. And that is not a clinician that should be working for my clinic, but that is a perfect clinician for going to some place where maybe you're doing women's health, pelvic floor, you know, persistent pain, you're dealing mobile, you're one-on-one with your client. You're never going to have 5 other clients walk in at the same time. But understanding the culture and kind of what the clinic is like, I think is so powerful. And again, back to burnout. Why are therapists burning out? Because they think they're just taking a PT job and they're not realizing all of these nuances that are so important to them.
Where are they going if they're not staying in the clinic?
Where what?
Yeah, so one place that they're saying that they're going is, drum roll, please.
You got to give me a second here. I don't have the drum roll queued up, but you got it.
Buc-ee's. In the home health group on Facebook, Tony. I by the way, sidebar, I think I'm going to leave every Facebook group except for the one started by Jimmy McKay and Tony Maritato, because they're my buddies here. But I think I'm going to leave every Facebook group on Facebook. There is so much negative sentiment. It is unbelievable. And here's an example. In I forget the title of the group. It's like home health, I don't know, PT, OT, SLP, or whatever, home health. So now, again, there's a lot of negative sentiment about productivity and all that. And you can maybe pull up like hiring if they have like a tab.
It's the job board with all the salaries.
There's and even Greg Todd posted this recently about the hiring thing. And they had this, by the way, because I took a trip down to Georgia a year or so ago. And even on the gas pumps, like they're advertising to hire everywhere for Buc-ee's. And there's home health physical therapists say that, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, $115,000 salary. Yeah. You want to be an assistant manager and scrub 100 toilets and make sure, and you got to be managing people that are supposed to be scrubbing toilets and are not coming for a $20 per hour job. And you want to be managing, ribs being cut. Go ahead, see how fulfilling that's going to be, because again, the grass is always greener.
Well, maybe that's the thing, is if people are willing to take less money. I was willing to work for
no. They want the same, or they want more money, but they want to have it their way. But the point is then they're going to be, you want to go into food, you want to go cut ribs and cut the fudge at Buc-ee's and scrub toilets and manage, like, it's just, no matter what, people want more money, but they want less responsibilities.
Hold on, but you just said something and left it out, right? I'm being sold rewarding. I'm getting there. It's not rewarding or financially securing. I feel gypped out here.
So part of the home health group that I'm referring to, as Tony and I have discussed many times, is these home health companies are usually Medicare Part A, which goes back to the patients. The therapists go to the patient's home and the patients start cursing out the therapist because the patient doesn't want the therapy. The hospital is sending the Medicare Part A company, and these are companies across the whole US. I'm not even going to name any of the companies, but it's not really the company's fault, but it's just it's the business that they're in. That the patients don't really want the therapy. And then the therapists feel the anger, the frustration. They got to deal with someone. They're going into someone's home, and the patient is literally cursing, using every curse word possible. This is what I've heard, not just in New York, but across the country. They're cursing at the therapist. And Scott, I think earlier, said that will suck the life out of you or energy out of you, whatever. I think he wrote that earlier today. dealing with those kinds of patients all day long, suck the life out of you by the end of the day. And that's just one day. And then you got to work there multiple days until you find a different job, either at a different physical therapy practice
or
you go work at Buc-ee's. But again, it's like these therapists, like there's no other opportunities. There's no, in the states that they're in, like there's no other, I'm sure they could work for Luna. I'm sure Luna is in a lot of these states that these home health therapists are complaining about. And if you did a Luna 1099, even though I think Tony has a lot more affiliation with Luna, and I'm kind of like, Luna's like, to me, I'm like a competitor, or I think Luna's a competitor, but I'll be nice to Luna right now. Those therapists could absolutely join Luna. And then guess what? Those patients want that therapist coming. That's the disconnect, is like these therapists go on Facebook and they're like, this profession is done. There's so much burnout. This is terrible. We're not getting paid enough. I'm going to go work at Buc-ee's. Their heads are in the sand. They don't understand what business they're in, what therapy practice they're in. They can change it up, but instead these therapists go on Facebook and they talk negative town all day long. It's unbelievable.
Needs versus wants. People will not complain about the cost of a PS5. They might a little bit, but they're still going to buy it. But I will vehemently complain about the cost of gasoline or the cost of food. So I think when I went into this profession, I thought I was providing a need. But if someone doesn't want it, I am now the harbinger of bad news. Here I am again to make you do those things you don't want to do, to get the thing that you do want, but it's so far in the future that you're willing to say no short term. And then I guess you'll expect that long-term thing to come about. Here's the thing. I don't know if anybody's devastatingly wrong here. Is the profession was sold to people, explained to people. That's what selling is explaining to people. And when you got there, it wasn't quite like that. So you got angry. And I understand that. I'm not saying any of these things. No one's wrong, and simultaneously no one's right. Everybody is, it depends. We're all in the middle. But really the goal, I'm trying to understand what they're complaining about. And you're right too, Dave. Like, you can go make $150,000 at Buc-ee's, but you got to do Buc-ee things. It reminds me, I think it was, everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to do gangster stuff.
All right, I don't want to be a gangster, but I don't know if we got too far, but I will bring one more element in. I remember a couple of years ago, we went to a really, really nice steakhouse, and we're talking to the server. Actually, this has happened a couple of times. We were in Tampa, Burns Steakhouse. I don't know if anybody's familiar, but then also here in Ohio, Cincinnati, there's a precinct. So there's a couple really, really fine dining, beautiful steakhouse. I remember talking to the server, and, you go in and it's quiet, it's soothing, it's relaxing. It's an amazing experience. And I think about this. I'm like, all right, this person, I'm asking them questions. And I think it was the one in Tampa, Burns. The servers had to work on the farm. The farm raises the cattle. The server had to understand what the cows eat and do all of these things before they could even begin to serve customers. And then they had to understand the wine list, and they had to go through all of this extensive training. And then I look at the server, and they might have 1-2 tables a night, but they make a ridiculous amount of money. These are the highest of the highest professionals for what they do. And then the next day, I might drive through a McDonald's drive-through to get a coffee, and I'm thinking of the people behind the window, and they're running like crazy. The line is around the building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're making now maybe $20 an hour. And I just think these are both humans. They're both intelligent. They're both serving food. They're in the same industry, but they were at such polar opposite ends of the spectrum. And I know when I look at the person working the McDonald's drive-thru, that person would probably go crazy sitting in the Burns Steakhouse, doing all of those things at such a slow pace and such a quiet environment, even if they were making more money. And flip side, the server at Burns is not going to work the McDonald's drive-thru. And it's similar for me. I go crazy when I'm in the clinic with an hour time slot for every patient, and I see 5 patients in a day. I feel like I've just burned a day. I've lost so much productivity. There's so many more things I could have done. It just destroys me as a clinician, but I thrive in 3, 4, 5 people in the clinic. Everybody's kind of grooving and talking and socializing, and we're having a good time. A day will fly like that. So back to, once again, we can call ourselves physical therapists, but we can deliver such different experiences. We can enjoy such different settings. What's up, Jimmy? You look like you were going to say something.
I was just agreeing. That's just my face. I always look like I'm going to say something.
Scott said Tony doesn't want to be a gangster, but he is a bike. Yeah.
But by the way, we still haven't seen this Harley Davidson.
I know. I'm getting there. You know, my son has a little, what is it? A vending machine at that clinic, and he's dying for me to go there to see how much money he's made. My 11-year-old. So I will go there. I'll get a picture of the vending machine, and I'll get a picture of the Harley. Maybe I'll even put on some leather.
There we go. So I agree. I like that analogy, Tony, of the waiter or the, you know, the food handler, whatever you call it, like the fast food person that's running around like crazy. They are based, you know, it's a volume type place versus the example of the waiter who's at a fine dining, you know, steakhouse, who maybe has one table at a time, and maybe they're only serving a couple tables per night. They get paid, a lot more, and then they, you know, get tipped a large amount because of like the cost of food and all that. That's the point, is the people that are in that example that are working in like the fast food, they don't understand, like they need to either increase their skills, their understanding of like what else is possible in that industry. Like, hey, oh wow, if I you know, if I go on Netflix and I watch the show Bear, I don't know if you guys heard of this show. Have you guys heard of this show?
Yeah.
So Tony has and Jimmy has. It's like a Michelin star chef who goes back to his roots. I think he learned in Paris and all these other places, and he's a Michelin star chef at some big restaurant. Then he goes back to his roots at some, what is it, like a roast beef or like a steak joint, a steak sandwich type place in Chicago. And then he brings the whole environment. He brings, like, you know, you're doing everything wrong, everything's dirty, this and that, nothing's organized, and it's about the pride in the work and all that. In the example, the folks that are in the fast food line working in those jobs, they're either, there's a disconnect, they can't fathom the difference, that they don't need that much skill or that much understanding to change themselves from where they're at there to working at a fine dining establishment. We've all been at fine dining establishments, and it's not just one type of a person. It could be someone who has tattoos or long hair or whatever, but they got themselves into that position because they maybe want to make more per hour or whatever. And you do have to have some evolution of yourself. You have to increase your skills. You have to carry yourself differently, whatever. Yeah. But I just would wish, like, the last thing to do is go on Facebook and say your whole industry is terrible and wrong.
So that is never a good look, right? Because nobody wants to be with the whiners, right? We call them Eeyores. Like, nobody wants to be with an Eeyore. They drag everybody down. Even if they have some valid points, those people signal to the world, I am not about solving them. I am about sitting down and pointing at those things and saying, it's not fair. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. So go. But those people stick around and they bring a lot of other people. So we're either in the business of fixing this or get out, right? And there are enough. The funny part is, and you'll find, I just saw a great bell curve diagram the other day, is what you see and hear on social media or everywhere. It's at a party too. The bell curve exists at the party too. You hear the far left and the far right of any argument the loudest, and you assume those are the two options. That ain't true. There are the silent majority. We've got a couple people commenting on these live streams. I get X number of downloads. We get X number of views. We got 41 people watching right now and 2 people actively commenting. That math checks. There are people who want to learn and find solutions, but don't pay attention to just the Eeyores, just the whiners all the time. Don't listen to what people say. Watch what they do. Smart people will tell you that. Don't listen to what I say in my books or my video. Watch what I'm doing in the background. That is a successful. So find the PTs. I mean, if you really wanted to get out of this, find the PTs who are somehow happy in their jobs. Watch what they do. That's the answer, in my opinion.
And I think they're just happy people. You know, I think it goes back to that. Like, my wife could be happy doing anything because she is just a happy person. She's happy to be alive. She's happy to be healthy and moving around and doing the things, you know, that humans do. Real quick, as we wind down, I want to hit a tactical piece of information. I'm going to share this. Nancy Beckley, thank you so much for sharing this. So this was from Medicare Advocacy. And basically what it is, I'll scroll down to what I think is the key component. Under the final rule, covered entities and providers are required to provide qualified interpreters. People with LEP cannot be required to provide their own interpreters, and notices and taglines are required to in the top 15 languages spoken by people with LEP in each state. Now, LEP stands for Limited English Proficiency. So basically, as I understand it, and I am certainly not an expert in this.
This came out yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. This is brand new, hot off the presses. Private practice owners, we are required to provide interpreters. It is our expense. We have to pay for it. You know, and this is one of those things where, again, like the manual therapy being a bribe, I'm so conflicted. I have such mixed feelings about this, because on the one hand, I look at it and I'm like, don't tell me what is right and what is wrong in regards to government. Like, don't legislate what I do. I understand we need to protect those that are vulnerable, but at the same time, this is going to put cost burdens. Now, I mean, the reality is I've had like 2 in 20 years that are patients who needed an interpreter. But I'm sure there are places where this is a more common scenario. And what does it do at the end of the day? It drives small providers that can't afford an interpreter on top of Medicare reimbursement, or even worse, Medicaid reimbursement. Just drives them out of the business. Like, there is no way. Now, to Dave's point, this is where you go back to and you're like, all right, I could go into business for myself, but the expenses are too high. I can't afford a HIPAA compliant EMR. I can't afford HIPAA compliant privacy and policy manuals that cost $1,500. I can't afford, you know, ADA compliance if I'm going to open a clinic and facility. All of this legislation just makes it harder and harder for the individual to go into business for themselves. And so what you end up with is everything gets pushed toward where the money is, hospital owned, large facilities, things like that. And of course, they're the ones with the politicians in their pocket. They're the ones with the deep pockets, you know? So I want to protect the vulnerable, but at the same time, there's got to be some free market, because I know that so many of us can provide a better patient care experience if we didn't have so much regulation.
I skip right to how can we tactically solve this problem on a scalable way. Like hospital systems, a lot of times hospitals had this problem or this, I shouldn't say problem, but they had this situation for a long time, right? Where they would have a service and you would bring in a phone, and then that would have access to interpreters somewhere in a central database. So this is like nationally syndicating or worldwide syndicating an interpreter. Now you've got AI. I know it says something about artificial intelligence in that article, but those services out there exist. Can you just pay per use on that? Would that mitigate the cost and reduce the burden?
Yeah. So later it says the new rule also addresses the emerging area of machine AI interpretation and translation. It expressly accounts for intersectional discrimination, healthcare. Yeah. I mean, every time government passes a law, hence Nancy Pelosi is the best investor of all time. Right. Every time government passes more regulation and more laws.
How does she know what to invest in? How does she know?
Insider trading.
I had a sign language interpreter for a client and lost $75 a visit. It happened once, but he slept well. But it's like, hey, here's the definition of innovation that I stole from a former boss, David Petrino. Find a problem that everybody's looking at it and saying, not my problem. Solve that problem. So this only happened to Michael once. And it's unfortunate that he was able to provide great care. He did that. The person got it. And Michael, good for you on losing $75 a visit, but still doing it. He shouldn't have had to do that. This
Correct.
person should have also gotten the best care possible in the way they wanted. Someone solves this problem. That's a business, right? The problem we're talking about, ASL or different languages.
It's got to
Scott said, I'm in Florida. Do I hire a therapist that speaks Spanish, or do I pay for an interpreter?
I mean, if you're a physical therapist who speaks another language and you can now be zoomed in and now that is a provided service. Gosh, an EMR company could embed that in their EMR with a little button. I need someone right now live, or I see it on my schedule that this person speaks this language. So can you like reserve the Uber ahead of time? Can you reserve the interpreter? Because I'm going to need that person in front of their computer because I'm going to be in front of my computer with that person at 1:30.
And Scott just said it should be on the patient, should it not? So my feeling, like as a practice owner, it's got to be either on the patient or it's got to be on Medicare or the insurance companies. And ideally, it's easier to just say, oh, it should be these, these multi-billion-dollar insurance companies to pay for this. And it should have already been some CPT code like 20 years ago or something. The fact that it's not is crazy. Michael Silva, thank you again for your comment live here. And yeah, he absorbed the $75 per visit charge. But imagine if that was like, 3 patients a day. Like in some clinics, like you can't practice is not going to absorb that. That's crazy. Like that's absurd. That's absurd. Like how do you compete? Like let's say if you're in some inner city, and what if like 50% of your caseload was like a mix of all different languages, not like the example of, oh, let me hire one therapist that can speak Spanish, but let's say like even here in Brooklyn, like you walk down the street here in Brooklyn, you hear Russian, Bengali, English, Polish, Spanish, you hear everything. So if some practices, this would like annihilate these practices. So, I mean, it should be on the patient or it should be on the Medicare or the insurances, but to have it be the cost of the practice is absurd.
What if Michael crushed it and all the people in the area were like, this guy's great. And they start going and what is he supposed to do?
Right. Let's tease a future episode. I love business ideas. I mean, there are multiple business ideas that come out of this new law, this new legislation, from obviously AI technology to even, I'll tease this one. So Dave and I talked about cash therapists who are unaffiliated with Medicare can't do a Medicare covered evaluation without billing Medicare. So what should they do? They could hire a contracted therapist to telehealth in, do the evaluation, and then make the determination if future services are covered. If they're not, the cash PT can deliver those services. I see the same opportunity here. I've talked about this actually a bunch of times where I said, look, if I'm a Spanish speaking, if I'm a French speaking native therapist, if I'm in the Philippines and I can speak their language, and this should be an opportunity for bilingual or multilingual therapists who offer telehealth services to come in. And there's a very specific way that this could be done where I don't have the exaggerated fees to pay for an interpreter, but I can make this work financially. Let's talk about that on the next episode.
Ooh, the forward tease. All right, parting shots. Are we doing parting shots?
You go, Dave.
Dave, parting shot.
Trying to take a deep breath here on this parting shot. Parting shot. Man, there's happy people, there's unhappy people. It's in every profession. I appreciate you guys being a sounding board here. Hopefully we were putting out some, insightful, entertaining content at the same time, trying to be optimistic. We're trying to be happy. And so, if I have a problem with either Tony or Jimmy or the physical therapy profession or whatever, taxes, I don't know, anything, politics, I'm not going to go in a Facebook group and talk negatively and just do blanket statements. So hopefully I wasn't too negative. You guys can, the public at large can give me some private DMs and texts based on your feedback or insight. How about you guys? What's your takeaways? Parting shots?
Yeah, I would just say you got to understand the culture of the environment you're in. If you don't resonate with that culture, just move, change, switch, do something. Like if I can't find people that I resonate with, I go find them on YouTube. I go find them in podcasts like this. Like that's why I listen to so many.
Yeah. I've got two. I'll play off of Dave's, which is when you were a kid, your parents told you could grow up to be anything you want. Don't choose to be an and also everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to start doing gangster shit. So decide if you're a gangster and then understand what it is required to do that stuff, right? This is not this being a great physical therapist appears to be simple, but it's not easy. But if it's right for you, it could be worth it. We'll be back on Thursday. Same bat channel, same bat time. Thanks, guys.